can get going.
All right.
Thank you. I didn't get to chance to say hello to everybody. Hello, Reverend Lee and Patisse. I said something to Gerald and Mr.
Hello.
Watson and
Hi.
Angela. So it is now 6:32 and we will call the EEAB meeting for April 1, 2021 to order. Ms. O'Brien, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Rabbi Cohen. Miss Holland.
Present.
Reverend Lee.
Present.
Miss Penn.
Present.
Mr. Rhodes.
Present.
Dr. Downey.
Present.
Mr. Watson.
Present.
Councilmember Bestfitch.
Here.
Vice Mayor Whiteboy.
Here, and a quorum is present. The minutes from our last meeting on March 4th were sent to you electronically. I hope you've had an opportunity to review those. And if there aren't any corrections, I will entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
And the minutes have been approved. Under new business, I have some good news for you guys. The subcommittees are already meeting and they've already set, most of them have already set their dates and a couple have not because they have not met yet. But I am going to read off what I have just in case some of our viewers and residents are listening who want to participate in some of the subcommittees. So for trust, the chair is Patisse Holland. I will be the co-chair and the secretary will be Mary Bishop, and they will meet the first Tuesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. Break the Cycle of Poverty is going to be chaired by Robin Mitchell. Her co-chair will be Dr. Deneen Evans. The secretary is still to be determined. So if you know someone out there on that committee who wants to be the secretary, call Robin. I'm sure she will be excited to hear from you. And they will meet bi-weekly at 6:00 p.m. And I don't see, Ms. O'Brien, I don't see a day, but I think it was Tuesday. But anyway, she just has bi-weekly at 6 p.m., but I'm almost certain it was Tuesday. But Neighborhood Choice, which is our own Miss Angela Penn, who will chair that. Her co-chair is to be determined, and the secretary will be determined at their first meeting, which will occur, I think, the second Tuesday of every month. And your first meeting is the 13th. Is that correct? Okay, so they are all set and ready to go. Inclusive Culture is going to be chaired by Rachel Rulin. Her co-chair is Ahu Salim, and the secretary is Phoenix Kasi. And they have decided to meet the third Friday of every month at noon. So they're going to have a noon meeting. Service Delivery, which is going to be chaired by Reverend Lee. And they, their chair and secretary will be determined. And your first meeting, it's the first Monday of every month. So is your first meeting coming up, Reverend Lee, this coming Monday?
Reverend Lee, you're muted.
Got it. April 7th. Yes.
Oh, April 7th. Okay, it's going to be the first Monday of every month. And the first.
No. It's the first Wednesday.
Okay, yours is not correct then.
Okay.
So you want to tell us because she has first Monday. So if you want to correct it now so everyone can hear you.
It's April 7th. It's the first meeting. It's the first Wednesday of each month.
Okay. Thank you, Reverend Lee. So as you can see, the subcommittees are already at work. They're already meeting. They have not gotten their charges yet and the things that they want to start working on. But I have some recommendations that I've picked up along the way, and I will be reaching out, especially to you, Reverend Lee, and to Ms. Penn, because we already have some recommendations that would go under your committee. And so for those of you who are chairing subcommittees, I know you're wondering, well, where do we get our charge or how is this going to work? I'm sure you have some things already in mind that you would like to tackle and address. We just need you to share those with us so that we can keep a record of them and the progress and to determine if you're going to need some assistance with that subcommittee. Remember, I said we had people waiting to help you on your subcommittees. So we just need to know exactly what it is. But I do have some ideas. Mr. Cowell may have some ideas. Some of the other members on the board may have some ideas for other subcommittees that we can start tackling. For example, on service delivery, I got a call from Alicia Childress, I think, from the Small Business Development Center. And she thinks that the process really impedes minorities as far as getting information and grants, especially during COVID, because a lot of African-American businesses or minority businesses were really hit pretty hard. And she thinks that process is very convoluted, is very difficult to maneuver. And I thought maybe perhaps she would talk to you. That would be a good one to fall under service delivery. So that's just an example of some of the things that we may be working on, but you all have your own ideas. So I will leave that up to you. And that's why we selected you as chairs, because we know that you're more than capable of pulling together some charges. And if not, we have some concerns and some complaints that have come through council that we can, pass out and disseminate to the appropriate subcommittee.
Vice Mayor, if I can just, add just one,
Uh-huh.
just a couple of items to that. One of those is I would ask that with each of the committees, thank you for letting Angie know the meeting dates and the times and stuff. I would ask that we have somebody from the staff at one of those first couple of meetings just to kind of help sort of get that flow. And also because there are other staff members that could be made available depending on the conversation. And then the last thing I'll say is just as a reminder to the committees and of course to the board members is in addition to those charges that Vice Mayor Whiteboy just talked about, of course you have at the core of all of it is what's identified in the comprehensive plan, and underneath each of those areas. If you remember, we went through those policies and actions, and those are established in the plan and will obviously be central to what it is that each of the committees work on in trying to, not going to necessarily work on all of those pieces. You're really starting to try to prioritize those and then kind of embellish those so that you can help the city advance on those. The other thing we'll need to do, and this will be more for the board, is to kind of figure out how frequently you want the committees to report back to the board so that you kind of know where things are and start to formulate your focus on how you're going to advance some of those ideas and stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cowell. Yeah, we were going to talk about that because because of the fact that all of the subcommittees have not met yet, we will start reporting at our next meeting. So after they meet, they should all have met by our next meeting, which will be in May. We will be looking for a report before that meeting. So we will have it and incorporate it with the minutes. So I think.
Vice Mayor, I just have a quick question as to that report.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So if you're asking for that prior to the May meeting, can you all let us know what the deadline is to submit that so that we can pass that on to our recorders and secretaries?
I will let me wait until everybody has met so that we can see, because I know Reverend Lee does not meet until the following Wednesday. So I will have Ms. O'Brien send out a date with some guidelines and maybe a format for the reporting so we all collect the same information. So
Okay.
let us do that. That might be simpler, but thank you for that question.
All right, thank you.
I think that is the only thing we have on item 3. No, actually, there is one other thing. C on number 3. We wanted to just bring you up to date on the governor's One Virginia. I'm not sure if you've heard of that One Virginia, but I'm going to just give you a brief overview. And I think Mr. Cowell was going to give you a little bit more information about it.
Yeah, and Trish, did you want to, item B was tied with Lee Plaza. Did you want to do that one and then One Virginia, or do you want to do One Virginia first?
I want to do One Virginia, and I'm
Okay.
sorry, I meant to text you. I think that is going to take a little bit more discussion.
Okay.
So if we could go ahead and do that and then come back to be, and actually I didn't even look at it. I thought it was further down the agenda
No, no
already.
problem.
Okay, thank you. So One Virginia is actually a collaboration with the Governor's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The Department of Human Resource Management has worked with him, and this plan will focus on advancing inclusive excellence, as they're calling it, all across state agencies. So it will also outline priorities, and goals of state government. And they're hoping that this will cultivate and promote a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture, not only for the employees, but for the stakeholders and the residents. The governor wants everyone to feel welcome and empowered. Does that sound familiar? It also positions the state as a national leader in building a statewide strategy to advance diversity and inclusion. And these changes are going to be made through services, systems, and operations. So they're pretty much aligned just like we are. So the intent behind the One Virginia plan is to use this inclusive excellence framework to sort of disrupt, I would say, outstanding injustices and inequities, and create a sustainable change, which is what we're hoping to do. And so this is going to be something that will give the Virginia businesses an advantage, that we hope will give them an advantage, and will make it a more attractive place to live, learn, work, and play. So their plan really mirrors exactly what we hope to accomplish through the EEAB right here in Roanoke City. So for me, it was very refreshing when I read it to see how it works. And I haven't read it in detail because it's a pretty extensive plan, but it was really refreshing to see them working in tandem with the city of Roanoke and you know, throughout the state to create some diversity and inclusion. And I think, Bob, you wanted to go into a little bit more detail or give them an idea how it actually works.
Yeah, thank you. And I won't take up a lot of time with this, but I do think that it, to parallel what the Vice Mayor just indicated, is we thought this was important for the group to be aware that this effort's going on at the state. It is predominantly geared toward state agencies as well as higher education, and really is the state's effort at trying to do something very similar to what we're trying to do, which is really infuse this conversation of diversity and equity and inclusion throughout those agencies. And they're all expected to actually generate plans and some other kinds of activities with it. I would definitely encourage you. I know Tiffany just had up a few moments ago the website that has been established for this. There's actually already quite a bit of information that's on the website. Would definitely encourage you to look at some of the presentations that they created that helped explain this program. And in particular, Tiffany, if you scroll about halfway down, where right before, just a little bit further, right there where it says Charlottesville, and then it says click here, kind of right above the toolkit. You see that spot where it says to see an example? Yeah, if you'll click there, this is probably one of the more useful, even though everything they've done is really oriented towards state agencies and higher education, as I mentioned. They actually did a pilot, and the pilot was with the Charlottesville area. And so Tricia just mentioned this notion of using this particular kind of model that is talked about regarding inclusive excellence. And this example that they have of Charlottesville really shows how that's been put into kind of action, if you will, as it works its way through. So that's a really good resource also. And between all of these resources, for the committees, there's some really good, just like the GARE information we provided as well. In this information, there's also some really good worksheets that I think could help as you look at the different different policies and those kinds of things that you're looking at, that I think will actually help shape some of the thinking that goes on. So again, we really just wanted to kind of highlight these resources and this effort that's going on at the state level. I think it even will be possible at some meeting in the not too distant future. I think we could have someone from the state join us at one of our meetings and perhaps explain in a bit more detail about what they hope to accomplish with this effort. And I think, in fairness, we can share with them what it is that we're trying to do here in Roanoke, and that will complement what they're doing. So if you get a chance, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at this information that Dr. Underwood has put together out of the governor's office. And again, there's quite a bit of really good information in here. So just wanted to draw that resource to your attention. So thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor, if I may, this is Dr. Stanko Downey. Back in February, we sponsored, one of the sponsors actually, on the Governor's Summit on Equitable Collaboration, and Dr. Underwood presented the plan there. I've put a link to the website. in the chat because not only were we there representing Roanoke as a business, but there was also a panel from Carillion present at one of the workshops. So there's already a president of Roanoke presence in collaboration with this plan. And I think it would be important to highlight that and see that we're already sort of championing that equity and diversity at that state level.
We're already a step ahead of them. And, you know, I didn't realize, I thought Tiffany actually put that in the chat. I was going to mention that, but I'm glad you did. Thank you for doing that. So everyone else can access it if they want. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You know, the more we meet and the more we get done, the more exciting this really becomes, because we are really trying to address some of those longstanding inequities that exist right here in Roanoke City, and to see them doing it on a larger scale throughout the entire state was, like I said, was really refreshing. So I think that is all that I have. Now we're down on the agenda to item B that I skipped over because I wanted to have a conversation regarding renaming of Lee Plaza. And I did not want to wait. I told Mr. Cowell that I would like to have some discussion about it at this time to see if maybe we could come up with a recommendation. If we cannot, that's fine. We will continue to have further conversations. But the reason I wanted to do it at this particular meeting is because we just had the public hearing. And most of you remember the conversations or remember some of the things that were said. So it just makes sense to me to go ahead and have the conversation. But just in case, Bob, I think since this is really the bulk of what we have left, I think I'm going to go over really quickly what some of the recommendations were, just to refresh your
Yeah,
memory.
and I think, and I believe that Angie had sent to all of the board members the kind of two-page piece, and that's, I believe, Trish, is what you're going to go over, correct?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm going over. So the board members will have it, but for the general public, because a lot of it came in via email, so you may not have seen that. But these are some of the recommendations that we have. Jerome Stevens recommended Memorial Plaza. Mary Dodge recommended Military Plaza. Matt Jones recommended Lax Plaza. Tiffany Jordan, Reverend James Beatty Plaza. So I'm not sure if she wanted the whole name or just Beatty Plaza. Bill Irvin recommended the World War II Memorial Plaza. Brenda Chapman, Lax Plaza, in honor of Henrietta Lax. Joanne Holden, leave Lee Plaza like it currently is. Doug Phillips recommends Lee Plaza, like LEA. I'm not sure if that's a play on words or a compliment to Mayor Lee, but he wanted LEA Plaza. And Paul Lilly recommended Freedom Plaza. Monica Wood said, sad to push everything, leave it alone. Don't change it. Shame on us. Anthony Kanopaka, change it to Robert E. Key, K-E-E Plaza. Keith Pullen recommended Don Pullen. I think that might have been his father, Don Pullen Plaza. Dr. Nussbaum, Henrietta Lax Plaza or Lax Plaza. Daniel Carnes recommended Freedom Plaza. David Keith, Star City Plaza. And Alicia Cohen, Henrietta Lax Plaza. Okay, I had to read through her comments. Robert Baldwin, Star City Plaza. Lee Learman, Henrietta Lax. Kathy Cohen, a fountain, a beautiful fountain. Roy Matthew, Memorial Plaza. Geraldine McGrath, Liberty Plaza. Joanne Hayden, Citizens Plaza. Okay, yeah. Joanne Hayden, Citizens Plaza. Regine Coleman, Henrietta Lax Plaza. Ron Lax, who is actually the grandson of Henrietta Lax. Of course, Henrietta Lax Plaza. Gloria Mans, Henrietta Lax Plaza. Dotsie Clifton, Henrietta Lax. Barbara Richmond, Henrietta Lax. Myra Allen, Henrietta Lax. So those were the recommendations that that came in. I think I heard Mr. Best Pitch. Can I call on you? Were you able to have some more sort of rough tally on how many we had, how many different ones, or how many we had that were the same?
Well, I didn't tally them, Madam Chair, but I know that there were only a couple that had more than one as far as names, except for Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks obviously had a lot of people, and the rest of the names that were mentioned only had one or two people.
I think I heard Military Plaza a couple of times, Freedom
Yeah.
Plaza a couple of times.
I was just speaking of the people's names.
Yeah, yeah.
Names. For the things that are not somebody's name, yes, there were some Freedom Plaza, Liberty Plaza, Military Plaza, and Star City Plaza got more than one.
More than one. So those are the names, and based on what we have heard from either through email or during the public hearing, are there any thoughts? I'd like to entertain this now. We have time to do it because I'd like to make a recommendation to council if we can. If we cannot decide, then we will have to carry it over. But I don't want to have to try to get out of the sun. I don't want to have to prolong it too long because the conversation is still fresh. So I will open the floor for any discussion on the name change for Lee Plaza. I saw Mr. Reverend Lee's hand first.
Yes, does the city have a process for naming? I do not want to do something quickly and it becomes precedent setting and then people think this is the way we do naming in the future. So I just need to know, is there a process for naming?
I'm not really sure if we have a process because the name Lee Plaza was done. I don't think we had a public hearing when that was done, but that was before my time. I think it was before your time. But do you recall, Mr. Best Pitch, or Bob? Do you want to respond to Reverend Lee?
Yeah, and I'll respond to two things. One is, and I'll thank Melinda Mayo for this research. So Lee Plaza was actually officially named through a resolution by the council in 1957. So that's when it was actually given the name. Procedurally, there's a very well-defined process for things that are named associated with the schools. So the school has established a very well-defined process. The city is more open to the process. We have really varied as to how we approach this. So I think in this case, what the council has indicated is that they would like to rename Lee Plaza, and B, that they are asking the Equity and Empowerment Advisory Board to undergo some process, which you all have started, in order to formulate a recommendation to the council. I then expect probably once that recommendation is delivered to council, council may very well hold another public hearing around that recommendation, and then they'll be able to act on that. But really, it's a fairly loosely defined policy unless you're working on renaming a school facility.
Okay, and I will add that was a part of the recommendation from council is to run it through the Equity and Empowerment Advisory Board. So they have charged us with coming up with a recommendation, not saying that they will accept that recommendation, but they want us to bring them a recommendation. And we've already done part A, the public hearing. And Mr. Watson, and I think then next Ms. Penn, is that correct? I didn't see your hand. Okay, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Trish. Three things. I was counting the Henrietta Lacks numbers as you were calling them, and it's either 9 or 10. Second thing, we had some other recommendations at our last meeting that I didn't hear you name. Aaron Ewart wanted to name it Burn Ewart Plaza. Rachel Rulin suggested R.R. Wilkinson. Jordan Bell suggested William B. Robertson, and Barbara Dirk also had said Freedom Plaza. So I don't know if the names that you have are from some formal meeting beyond that, but okay.
No. In
Okay.
fact, yeah, Miss O'Brien, I think, probably did the best she could at trying to capture all of those. So those are she was compiling all of the names and recommendations, and she forwarded them to me in one email. So thank you for adding those. But that was, see, most of these came from that same meeting, the public hearing. So what Aaron, you're right. I remember Aaron now at the public hearing, and also,
And those items,
Yeah.
those items, and Angie can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the items that are on the list that you're reading from Vice Mayor are the items that Angie received in addition to the meeting. The items that Board Member Watson's talked about are included in your approved minutes from that public hearing. So it's really both of those lists. And I can pull up those minutes in case there's any names that we also need to reinforce.
Well, we do, because I know Ron Lax was a phone call from the public hearing, so I assumed that I had them all. I know that Gloria Mann and Dotsy Clifton were also phone calls, so that was just my assumption that we had them all. But yeah, if you want to do that, that would be good.
Yep, I will do that while you all continue to talk. So.
And
Okay.
Trish, may I ask a question, either of you and Bill and Bob in particular, or the whole group? In addition to honoring either a concept or an individual, see if I can frame this correct. What is the underlying motivation for selecting a name in addition to the honor? Has there been any thought given to that in terms of how it might separate certain nominations from others?
No, the floor is wide open. We just need to, we want to rename it. And, we are taking every recommendation into consideration. It is going to be our task to try to come up with a recommendation. And I hope we can do that based on the information that I just provided, based on what we heard ourselves at the public hearing. And I think maybe there might be a few more. Bill, did you see a few more that we didn't have other than the ones Mr. Peter mentioned?
Yeah, I was just
Oh,
pulling
I'm
that.
sorry, not you, Bill. I'm sorry. That was
No problem.
Well-
On your approved minutes, you mentioned already, obviously, there were a couple of more for Henrietta Lacks. Of course, we mentioned the Bern Ewart item. Reverend Wilkinson obviously was mentioned as well. Freedom Plaza or Freedom Square, that actually came from Barbara Dirk, either of those options. And then, as was mentioned, Jordan Bell mentioned the William Bernard Robertson. So those were the names. I think Board Member Watson mentioned all of those. So that should be all encompassing of what you heard at the public hearing, as well as what Angie received outside of the public hearing.
Okay, so basically, we have four or five recommendations because, well, actually, we can consider the name. I don't know that we want to do just one person's name, because in 10 years, 20 years, they may not, nobody may not remember that number. However, I will exclude Henrietta Lacks from that, because Henrietta Lacks is known all over the world for her HeLa cells. And we currently, and I know Mr. Cowell knows it, and so does Mr. Bestpitch, that I have worked independently of this committee trying to get something to memorialize her here in Roanoke, because she was born here. And we really don't have anything to memorialize her here. And with her contributions, I think that it would be a draw for people to come and to know that this is where Henrietta Lacks was born. And if you haven't read the story, or you don't have enough information, perhaps you should do that. But it is an amazing story, and it's just unbelievable that that woman was born right here in Roanoke, and we have not done something as of yet to memorialize her. And I think that's the sentiment of at least most of the callers and the emails that came in. Now, that's just my little tidbit, but I would certainly like to hear from the rest of the board in reference. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Rhodes.
So are we putting together a slate just to present to City Council, or
we need one
name?
One name. And council may reject it, or they may say, hey, I think you guys did a great job, we're going with it. But when I talk to them, they want one recommendation, one name coming from out of this board.
Reverend Lee has his hand up
Ye-
again.
Yes, Reverend Lee, I'm sorry.
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor. I just need to be clear. This is my fourth meeting.
Yes, sir.
I just need to know if a citizen asks me, and I'm representing the citizens of Roanoke with this recommendation, what was the process? The only thing I know is the public meeting. That's all I know.
And you're,
And so I'm going from public meeting to making a recommendation. Now, if that's the clear process, then I want to be able to say to persons, that's the process. But I'm just being honest with you. I guess the years of doing this stuff just make me leery that I do not want the citizens to think that it was predetermined and we are rubber stamping something that council has already decided. Now, hear me, I'm not saying council has, I'm just want to make sure I've dotted I's and crossed T's. So if anyone asks me a question, I can legitimately say I went through a process.
and that's why we're having the discussion. So you can, out of the list, and it doesn't even have to be anything on this list, but I would hope that it is because these are the recommendations that came in through the public hearing. And
No, I'm not making myself clear. It's not the list. What I'm asking is this it? This is the process. We're at decision making now. There's no other process to be done.
we
Okay.
have yes, we have the authority to do that, this board. Yeah, we have, that's pretty much it, Reverend Lee, we have the authority to do that.
Okay,
And this-
I just want to be clear.
yes, yes. Mr. Bestpitch?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that city council has not had any discussion at any point of what the name should be. The only thing that's been, I think, very clear from everybody on council is we got rid of the monument. We need to get rid of the name. We need to call it something else than what it has been called since, as Mr. Cow said, at least 1957. And the other thing that I wanted to share is that I was quoted, I think, a couple of times in the news media as saying that I wanted it to be Freedom Plaza. What I said was that my personal preference, similar to what Vice Mayor White Boyd said a minute ago, rather than name it for any individual, to name it for a concept such as Freedom Plaza. That's only an example, the type of thing that might get people thinking about Liberty and Memorial and Military and all the Citizens Plaza, all the other names that people came. So I didn't want anybody to think that that I was actually saying that that's what I thought it should be. I was just trying to give an example to get people thinking.
Thank you for that clarification. Does Bill, do you have an opinion? Does anyone else have any conversation about what's on the table?
I would rather hear from others at this point.
Madam Chair, I too was a little concerned about our process, only for the matter that it seems sometimes when we move forward and something is put out there, then we might hear feedback from people who felt left out of the process because they didn't understand what that process is. And so that is the only hesitancy that I have, and wondered if there is an opportunity to look at the more structured process that the schools have in regards to renaming something, in order that there be something to hold on to, as Reverend Lee was expressing. So that's the only concern that I have, is that as we move forward, some people may feel that they were left out of the process once a recommendation is made.
And you know, that's the whole reason we really push the public hearing, because you can have 2 or 3 public hearings and you still may not reach the masses, because there's always going to be somebody that felt they didn't have an input in it. So if we are not able to move forward this evening, then we would have to continue it until May. But then I don't know if there's going to be another public hearing. So we're just, you understand what I'm saying? We would just be moving it to another date. And then perhaps maybe we could look at the process for naming the schools. But, I'm not, because there's really not a lot of, I mean, we've got some markers, some historical markers that we have all throughout the city. I'm not sure what the process is for those historical markers. Do you, Mr. Powell?
Yeah, those are actually pretty similar in that, typically what happens with those is either an individual or a group of individuals identify some interest in doing, the historic recognition or the historic marker. Very often they then engage in kind of individual conversations with stakeholders. Sometimes that's the families of folks being acknowledged. Very often it's the neighborhood in which that's going to be placed or who's being honored or those types of things. And then really the coordination after that with the city tends to fall in those instances on things like, organizing the ribbon cutting or those. But those historic markers are actually for the most part on private property where an easement has been secured. And so our role really is to kind of help celebrate that piece of it. And that's because the city itself doesn't put up those historic markers, which would be a little bit different, a different approach. And let me, if it's okay, let me share with you, since it's come up, I just want to share with you what the school's policy is, and I'll do this as succinctly as I can. And I'm looking at it right now, so I'm just kind of pulling this information, pulling the information up. But they have a number of, things they won't consider, like certain types of names, certain kinds of other activities, and then there's some things that they expect to be in place. But they actually form a renaming committee that actually solicits, very similar to what you all have done. They actually solicit names and kind of debate those names. And then ultimately they make a recommendation to the school board with those from that process. And you all remember when we went through the process of the naming of the Jackson School and changing that name, that after the school board controls that piece, because then remember the council actually met after that to change the name of the library. And that's a really good example where there was no process in the renaming of the library other than acknowledging that the school had gone through a process to rename the school. So to Reverend Lee's point, really the city's process is kind of uniquely designed for each instance or for each situation. So if you all would like, you can either use this process, which is the Equity and Empowerment Advisory Board conducting the public hearing and then debating the possible names and making the recommendation, or you all may choose that you want to define a different or even more complete kind of process. That's entirely up to this board. I think, as Mr. Bestfitch has indicated, really the only thing the council has asked is that at the end of whatever process you feel most comfortable about, some recommendation be made to them so that they can then choose what they would like to do at that point with that recommendation.
And may I say, we also renamed the park.
Yes.
Across from the middle school at that point. And I just want people to be aware that my experience over the years, and I've had quite a few of them, when we have multiple public hearings on something like this, it's not so much the people that didn't know about it the first time that get involved. It's the people who were involved the first time who enlist an army to come with them to promote a particular name that they like, giving the impression that choice is widely popular throughout the city, but not necessarily the case. So I just think we have to be careful to acknowledge that the person that organizes a large group to show up is not necessarily representing what more people in Roanoke would want it to be.
Madam Chair, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just have two quick questions. The first question I have is there going to be, is it going to be a situation where we'll be naming other locations in the city, other buildings in the city? Because the only reason I ask is, I'm thinking of Henrietta Lacks and Roanoke being, turning into this huge medical community. Are there any other locations in the city where maybe perhaps that would be, a corridor where you'd have like through the Carilion area where that would be more appropriate in a certain area of the city? So that's what I just wanted to know, if this is the one chance we have to name something, or will there be future opportunities to name other areas or other buildings in the city? Because some of these people have specific causes, certain subject areas that connect with them. So maybe it makes more sense. Again, with Henrietta Lacks, looking at that, I'm just looking down Jefferson Street, all through that Riverside Plaza. Are there any public spaces and places where that particular name would be more appropriate for that, because of that area? So that's my first question. The second one is there an opportunity, just to I've been listening to the concerns, which some of them are also mine. Is there an opportunity in lieu of a public hearing to take the top three names or concepts that have been put forward, and to put that out as a survey to the public, and have them vote on those top three names? So at least we can, for people that feel like they're not getting enough feedback from the public, at least you can see which one rises to the top. And it may become what Bill just said, is you just get the most people lobbying for a name, but at least we would have some, at least we would be able to tell members of the public, well, you all had an opportunity to vote on these three names that came through to us from the public hearing.
So to answer your question, number one, this is pretty much an unusual circumstance. We don't have that many opportunities to name something. And if it's a public, if it's like the city owned, then we might have an opportunity. But if it's a private building or they name their own.
Absolutely.
So that's probably why we're struggling with the process, because this is just an opportunity that kind of arose out of some unusual circumstances. That doesn't happen that often. As you can tell, there are not a lot of names of things here. And that's why I mentioned the historical markers, because that's the only thing that I've seen that referenced anything really, other than the schools, which Bob mentioned that process, pretty much how that works. And that is a one-time deal until here recently, when the climate has changed and said, we don't like those names anymore. So, those names were there for decades. So it's not something that is done very often. Number two, we can certainly do that. We can certainly, put out a public survey and say, hey, bring us back some names, but also keep in mind that no matter what we take to council, if they reject it and want to say, well, yeah, I appreciate your efforts in this, but we've decided that this is what we would like to do. They have that ability to do that. So, so it's up to you, and that's why we're having this conversation. It's up to this board to whatever you guys think you might want to do. I'm open and receptive. I just want you to know that this is merely a recommendation to council.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
a quick question. Does council have a timeline or a deadline for us submitting a recommendation?
No, we absolutely do not. The only reason I wanted to have this conversation is because we just had the public hearing. Now, if we have the conversation, 2 or 3 months from now, we really, it kind of loses its, I don't know how to describe it. It kind of loses its enthusiasm, or, its little luster there. So I told Mr. Cowell that I thought it would be appropriate to go ahead and have a discussion, because that's what we talked about previously, was having the public hearing, and then we would discuss the recommendations. So I guess it just came relatively quickly for some of us. So it's here, but we can certainly look at Ms. Holland's idea and send out a survey. I don't know how. Mr. Cowell, we do surveys all the time. Could we do a survey with, but even with that, do we put all 10 names, or do we sit here today and decide because we have, just a little bit more time. I don't want to spend too much more time on it. But do you want to decide on several names in this body, or you don't want to do that? You want to carry it over until May?
Well, Madam Chair, if I could just correct my suggestion, it wasn't to put all of the names back out there. It's to look, you were sort of referencing a tally of who had the the 3 top votes or something like that. Now, certainly if all 3 are just names, maybe we could come up with the top 5, which may include the 2, couple of concepts, freedom, whatever that different
Star
thing
City.
was. But I think we limit all of this. I don't think we want to open it back up where we have people just typing in names. But certainly we can say this is what was submitted via the public hearing, and we are considering this top tier, the recommendations that came in, and then that way it can sort of help us narrow it just through public contribution through the survey. But that's just a suggestion for me. But I just want to clarify, it's not the whole.
And Trish,
Okay, let me hold on, Mr. Watson, let me just finish this thought. So what could we use as a process of elimination for today, or do you want to just continue it until May and put the names that we got through the public hearing? I mean, we're not going to open it back up, but put all of the recommendations that we got through the public hearing and see if we could come back with no. Okay, so so how do you want to come up with what is the process for the elimination of the other names? Do we want to continue it to figure out a process to eliminate the other names? Or do you think we can do that here this evening?
I would think that if we have, of course, we have multiple recommendations for Henrietta Lacks. So that would be one that I would think would be on the survey for voting. Then we would look at others that were perhaps mentioned multiple times, such as Freedom Plaza. I think that was mentioned multiple times. And then whatever the next one that was mentioned on several occasions. So that would give you a couple to have a list there that people could select from. So I see 1 name and 2 concepts that are in the top 3. You guys can correct me or help me here with others that you may have heard that were more than one time.
Military Plaza was another one that I think I heard twice. And, actually, I think
Memorial Plaza got a couple names, I believe. Memorial Plaza, I think, had more than one.
I think that Memorial, Military, Freedom, Star City. I think Star City was mentioned.
Yeah, I think Vice Mayor, what I would suggest we would do if you want to go in this direction is we would take what is in your recorded minutes and we would take what Angie received and sent out to the group. We would just do a tally. And if it's the desire to say whatever the top 3 that, were those would be the 3. We already know that Henrietta Lacks is definitely one of those. So it's really just finding out based off of that tally of what was received to date, what the next 2 are. Then I think it's just a matter if it's a desire to actually survey residents. Obviously the easiest way for us to survey folks is to push something out on social media that's going to capture some part of the community. What we would probably do is figure out another way in which folks, if they didn't have access to social media, would be aware that opportunity existed. So, I mean, that's how we would probably do it. And then all I need to know is, 1, are you comfortable with that approach? And then 2, is that a survey that you would want to occur between now and your May meeting? Because that'll help us figure out kind of timing of when we would do that.
Hey, Madam Chair, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Rose.
When you consider sending out something to everyone in the city, if you send out like a Memorial Plaza, a Citizens Plaza, or Star City Plaza, and you put 1 individual, Henrietta Lacks, on there, and if you have people who do not know who she is and they're not interested in who she is, then they're going to automatically just say, go with Star City Plaza or whatever. But we held a hearing and the majority of the people said Henrietta Lacks. So I'm just saying, consider that. It's easy just to choose a Star City or Freedom Plaza, and you're putting an individual's name on there that had a strong, a huge influence on the world. So,
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do it and the fairest way to do it. We cannot send it out to the entire city. We did not budget for that. it has to be electronic, however we do it. And so it would either be through our website or social media. And I agree with you, because if they don't know who Henrietta Lacks was, because I had, you know, Jeff Sturgeon, and he said he was going to be watching tonight from the Roanoke Times, who had never heard of her. And then after I gave him the information and he, you know, did some research, he wanted to reach out to the family member because he was really intrigued with that. So you're right. We might need to figure out another way to do it, because we don't want her to get lost in the process, because that was pretty prominent. That her name came up quite a few times from all across the city, different folks all across the city. So I think we might have to rethink that, Mr. Cowell, because like Mr. Rhodes said, if we send it out with Freedom Military, Star City, and Henrietta Lacks, if you don't know who she is, we might lose her automatically. And
But the other alternative maybe for you all to consider, I mean, again, you know that Henrietta Lacks was definitely the most mentioned name so far. So you could actually then do some kind of polling for the other names. So in other words, you'd say, okay, well, we know Henrietta Lacks is one of the ones we're going to consider. Now, among the other names that we received, is there a preference out of that list? And we may pick the top, you know, 3 of those or what have you. So that then come May, what you would have is you would have in front of you, you would have Henrietta Lacks' name, and you would have the one that's not Henrietta Lacks that is seemingly favored among the others. Then it would be up to the board to decide, okay, we know Henrietta Lacks was mentioned quite often, and of the other choices, this was the most favored. And then at that point, you would be able to make that recommendation. Or obviously, you know, if you all already feel like Henrietta Lacks is the number, you of course have that off, or the name, you have that as well.
That might, okay, I'm gonna get you, Mr. Watson. That might satisfy Ms. Holland's question, because that would work for you, wouldn't it, Ms. Holland? How you wanted to do it on the survey, as far as maybe getting the names, the top few, 3 or 4 names. It actually, if we do a tally, we're only looking at about 3 or 4 that were repeated at least twice. Maybe
Well,
3.
let me just say, I'm not married to the survey idea. I was just throwing that out
We
as
like
a
the idea.
suggestion.
We like the idea.
I'm not married to that idea, because I wanted to say as a caveat that if we go with that, and Bob makes a great point, we have to be willing to accept the results if that's what we're throwing out. But if we think of it as just a portion of our, you know, as a factor in our decision, and make sure that that's known, that that's just a percentage of how we're going to think about this. I think discretion should remain with the board ultimately, because we do want to make sure and honor the public meeting that we had. It looks like it may be too complicated anyway to do the survey, because it's going to limit who it reaches. And so, but again, I'm not married to the survey. I was just throwing that out as a potential option.
I haven't forgotten you, Peter, and that's a good point, Patisse. But Mr. Cowell actually made a good point. You know, we can retain Henrietta Lacks because we know clearly she should be a part of the discussion, and then put the other names on there. And you know, we can do it through the survey, social media, and the website. I'm just saying that we cannot afford to, I mean, that's just not something we can do, is mail out a survey to the entire city. That would be a waste of our funds, and we're not going to do that. That would probably go in the trash for a lot of people if it came in the mail. But I will go back to you, Mr. Watson, while you process that, Mr. Cowell, and let's think about what else we can do with that. Go ahead.
And Madam Chair, I heard you say you don't want to wait too long in this, strike while iron is hot. And also, as Bill said, you know, you can stack an audience in a meeting, but the same thing is true on a survey. So, and we've got I believe we have another public hearing coming up in June. I know that's 2 months, but maybe that's a middle ground we might want to consider, because I think what Bill Lee and Angela said is really true in our city. Unfortunately, a lot of times people haven't heard for whatever reason, even if it was their fault, and they think something's being passed along without appropriate citizen input. If we had another, if we asked for citizen input in June, as we did in March, it's our venue, it's our committee. the context is very clear. That might be a better option. I just wanted to suggest that.
Thank you for that. And I will go back to what Mr. Bestfitch said, you know, it's only going to swell, you know, with the same, it's just going to be more folks for Henrietta Lacks because, you know, they've gotten, so we can do that. I certainly have no problem with doing that. And I don't think council will object to us postponing our recommendation. I would like to hear from some others though. We've not heard from Dr. Downey. We've not heard from you, Mr. Bestfitch. We did hear from Mr. Penn and Reverend Lee, but do you have any comments at this point, Mr. Bestfitch?
Well, Madam Chair, I have to say that when I first started thinking about this, which was really the time that we began having the discussion about removing the monument, and that's been a couple of years ago. My thought has been that it's best not to name a particular individual, and that's why I had suggested, you know, something that's more of a concept. As I've thought about it more recently, including at the public hearing and since then, the name that really resonates with me at this point would be to call it Equity Plaza, because that's what we're all about. And that's what so many people in this country right now are beginning to embrace and work toward in a way that I'm not sure we ever have before. Not just saying everybody's equal, not just saying opportunity is there, but saying, let's be equitable about what we do. And, you know, the current example is we're not just saying everybody has the same opportunity to sign up for a vaccine. What we're saying is we know that there are some in our city who are not notified, they're not reached. And so the city has made tremendous efforts to target those people who are not so likely to be signed up and to get an appointment and get vaccinated, because that's the equitable thing to do. Not just say everybody had equal chance. If you didn't call, if you didn't go online and register, you know, you had your opportunity, equal opportunity. No, let's do equity. So that's, I know nobody suggested that at the public hearing, and I don't know if anybody else has even thought of it, but having said that, I would say that I think that the name Henrietta Lacks is the most widely known. As you said at the beginning of the discussion, Madam Chair, she's known worldwide. She's not known by everybody worldwide, but she's certainly known by many people worldwide. And I really like Ms. Holland's suggestion about thinking about this in terms of the Riverside complex some kind of way, because that is research. They may very well end up using some of the HeLa cells in the research right here in Roanoke. So another option that just pops into my head is, you know, we're in the process of developing part of the Riverside, or excuse me, River's Edge athletic complex into more of an actual park with ultimately a pavilion and all that sort of thing. So maybe that could be Henrietta Lacks Park, because it's right across the street from the research campus. So I would say if we're going to go with an individual's name, that's the one that I would prefer. And otherwise, I would call it Equity Plaza. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bestfitch. Dr. Downey.
Madam Chair, I think that given that we're the Equity and Empowerment Advisory Board, the more that we can work towards putting as many voices around the table as possible, I think the more it approaches the mission and the goal of our board. And so I like the idea of sort of doing a second round of the discussion via a survey, and perhaps a survey that has a little more information than just here are the 4 name options, choose one, right? It could be a survey that we split into here is the most to call it something popular, the most called in name. It's a name after an individual. And we also have 2 or 3 options after a concept. And we could include a link to information about Henrietta Lack so that folks who do not know who she is can learn about the name and the importance of this individual who was born here in Roanoke. And then, or perhaps include 1 sentence on there about her to give a sense of who she was. And likewise for the concepts, we could put a 1-sentence description on it to give it some kind of unity, right? I think a lot of folks don't quite understand what Memorial Day is, so explain what Memorial Plaza could mean or signify would be helpful. And in terms of equity, and going back to what Mr. Bestpitch has said, the analogy with the vaccination, I think it would just be an effort on our part and the city's part to let folks know that that survey is available on social media and how to access it and how to be a part of that conversation. But I do think that one more round of input will allow us to say, we've gone the extra mile to hear from as many voices as possible on the renaming of this plaza.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And in order to do that, the only way we could do it is via survey. And I'm pretty sure that they would include some information about each person or concept. I'm pretty sure that they would do that. So that's really good. And also it might be helpful to include a link. We don't want it to be too complex because we want people to be able to use it and access it. So I will, I guess task Mr. Cowell and his staff. It sounds like we would do the survey with the exception. And I don't know, I mean, I guess we could include Henrietta Lacks because I know initially, Bob, you said that perhaps just exclude her because we know that we want to have some discussion about her since, clearly that was the name that resonated the most with the folks that called in on the public hearing and even from the emails. So I guess we will go ahead and move forward and leave it at that. We'll just do a survey. At this point, looks like, I don't know how quickly you can get one out, Mr. Cowell, and have it back by the next meeting. So certainly we don't have to do, we can actually do it, to have this discussion in June, if you want to do the survey.
Yeah, it's up to you all. I mean, I think, what we could do is we could assemble a draft survey based off of the guidance you all have provided at this meeting, share that with the executive members, so the chair, vice chair, and the secretary, kind of get their approval, and then we could get that posted. And we could probably do that in time for some response at your May meeting. That's an option. The other option is we could draft that, and that could be an item that you all look at your May meeting, and then we go ahead and post it following your May meeting. So whatever the pleasure of the board is, I think we can take either path.
Madam Vice Mayor,
Mhm.
this is Batiste. I know we don't have an official motion as to this being an action from the board, but if you need one, I do think we need to review the survey. I just don't want us to lose any ability to have discretion, because in terms of the response that you were giving, Bob, to both Dr. Lee and also to Ms. Penn, was that this really kind of falls on the discretion of this board.
It
So
does.
I don't want us to put out a survey without communicating to the community that we still have a right to have discussion as a board. Should this board totally, if the results of the survey are, we learn there's just a campaign effort to have it be Memorial Plaza or something like that, we still want to be able to have and maintain discretion.
I think because of that, my suggestion would be that we actually craft a proposal of how we would put that survey together, what it would look like, and we actually bring it back to the full board at your May meeting.
That would
And then
be, yeah, that would be my suggestion.
And that's the exact same thing I was trying to convey about our recommendation when it goes to council. They still have full discretion whether to accept it or deny it. And so we will certainly do that. And I think at this point, if you want to, Ms. Holland, make that motion to I guess, carry this item over to the May agenda, or anyone.
Certainly, I guess I move to have a draft survey provided to this board for the May 2021 meeting.
Second.
Is there any objection? So do we want a roll call, or do you want to just say, have a voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes. I think, do we need a motion also to carry this, the item itself over to the May meeting, or we just carry it over?
No, I think you're good. We'll carry it over. It'll still be, what it'll change to, it'll probably be old business instead of new business, but no problem. We can. do that.
Okay. So that was all that we had on the agenda for this evening. So at this point, there is item 4. In the future, this will be an opportunity for those members to report from their subcommittee. So if you're a chair or a co-chair in one of the subcommittees, this item will allow you to report to the full board on what you've accomplished during your meeting at your subcommittee meetings. So there's nothing there now, but in the future there should be, because I think all of you would have met by the May meeting. And I think there are no announcements unless someone wants to share something with all of us before I announce the next meeting. Anything else you want to share, Mr. Bestfitch?
Madam Chair, I've tried real hard to capture who said what in the minutes up to this point. For this evening's minutes, I'm going to just try to capture all the ideas, the concepts that were discussed, the options that were discussed, and not necessarily attribute each one to a particular individual. I hope that'll be acceptable to the board when you get the next draft of minutes.
I think that will be just fine. Our next meeting will be May 6th. And, if you want to send out the draft, Mr. Cowell, prior to the meeting, so they will already have that, and we'll be prepared to discuss it.
We'll include that with your minutes and your agenda information, so you'll have that ahead of time. Also, Madam Chair, if I may, just point out that, and it speaks to something that Dr. Downey just mentioned as well, is you all know that fairly regularly there are recognitions of diversity that come out all the time, different events that acknowledge that we're highlighting a particular demographic or whatever it might be. And we try to capture as many of those as we can out on our social media campaigns, just to raise awareness of that. Of course, the past month was dealing with women in the community and kind of highlighting the role women have played in leadership. I would ask that if any of the board members have awareness of any of those kinds of recognitions, that you let Angie know that, because we'd like to get as many of those. And it speaks to this idea of, if anybody, this board should be the board that really recognizes and acknowledges the full diversity that's present in our community. And the more that we're able to do that, and in most cases, it's very simple, just an acknowledgement. There is that recognition and highlight that the presence of different individuals in our community. So if you become aware of any of those, to recognize some demographic or some segment of our community, just let Angie know that, and then we can start incorporating more of those into our announcements.
Okay, thank you. And also, when you start putting together the thoughts and the concept for the survey, Mr. Cowell, if it could be an electronic link that perhaps you can share with the rest of the board if they want to disseminate it to their contacts or church or wherever, we will have some other mechanisms to get that link out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. With there being no further items on this agenda, we can adjourn at 7:41. So
thank you all.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter.
Thank you, everyone.